Hey, it's Chris. So, you liked it, so we're going to do it again, but we are going to go hot off the heels of recency. The hype train of 2023. What do all the content creators say this year? Right? Where are things at? How do my rankings of the top 20-ish top games of 2023 compare? I'll tell you right now, folks. I am an outlier. Well, if you watch my channel at all, you already know that. But let's go. All of YouTube's, all of people ranking games of 2023. What the meta list is showing so far, and we're going off the Boardgamegeek ones in the comments link section down below, because, you know, I'm not doing the super algorithm math that a couple other websites are doing, but we're using that one to compare, contrast, give you my thoughts, and, you know, everything else in between. Want to rile some fan bases up? Let's go. So, what are we talking about here, right? Like, this geek list basically compiles it. They do some fancy math. They do some Excel spreadsheets, sort of trickle-down ranking, power-ish, you know. So, games that get higher ranked get a little more, but then games that have also a bunch of just rankings in general also get jacked up. So, that's what you have kind of going on here. And you know what? Let's start with the elephant in the room. I kind of said it earlier this summer, right? People are going to love this game. I am not one of those people, and, you know, I didn't get influenced by other people despite having these lists out well before mine. Month plus before mine. Tons of people loved Earth. The get tons and tons and tons of resources on a super complicated card-based grid as you create it and you go along. And my main comparison at that point was Ark Nova. You know, that people hyped that thing up beyond belief. And they're doing the same thing with Earth. And again, I have no qualms if you really liked Earth, right? Earth was fine. And you know what? I'm probably going to give it another shake here in the near future. But, you know, building these grids basically was, you know, sort of reminding me more in a way of Daybreak in the vaguest, most obtuse sense, in the sense that there are just so many resource plethoras that it's like, well, do I want to get 16 of this resource and 11 of this resource, or do I want to get 12 of this resource and 22 of this resource, right? And you're kind of going, well, optimization, well, you know, am I able to get everything I want? I'm able to get everything I want more, and it's just who can get the most vast sum total of things by the end. Because you have so many combinations and so many combos and engines that are bursting at the seams. And it was just a lot. Not a bad exercise in mathematics and combinations, but it also just maybe isn't the thing I want the most. I want to feel clever. And with so much of a good thing, too much of a good thing? But this game was literally on this link. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 people had it ranked number 1. That's probably another 12 or so have it ranked number 2. Half the people on this reviewers compilation have it ranked somewhere in 10ish. That's amazing. So people really liked it. It's just also how much do your tastes overlap with people like me? Sorry, bad comparison. Other, more relevant, more eloquent, better people who are better talking about board games than me, because we've already established that my taste is, well, there you go. Second up, again, not that it got a huge ton of ratings in the top, but just massive ratings overall is SkyTeam. And I want SkyTeam. I'm a big fan of cooperative, right? Number 2 here. And I'd love to play this game with my wife. Cooperative, dice, mitigation, a little bit of randomness, and just that nature. It kind of was like the more recently previous year's heat pedal to the metal, is that it's kind of been in and out of availability. And I just haven't been able to pull the trigger. Because this is a game, by all accounts, by every account I've read, seen, or heard about, that I should love this game. I should. I absolutely should love it. And you know what? Truth be told, it's why I did the other video of 2023 at the end of December, early January, where I said, hey guys, look, I would love to know what some of these games are, because they might have made it on my top 10 from this past year, right? You know, the more recent one that I'm just having either come out right before this or right after this, World Wonders, I was really impressed by that. Like, if I might have gotten that earlier in the year, it might be in my top 10. In, you know, this case, it was actually 13. But it could have risen, and that's why, again, I'm going to look back at this a year from now and say, Will it be in the top 10 when I revise these things and look at it further? And that goes strongly with number 3, right? It's the Euro that kind of swept things up on the lighter-ish side of things at the end since Essen. A board game caters to a very select crowd more so, especially the niche. I'm probably mispronouncing that again. I always screw that word up. But heavy gamers, heavy Euroers specifically is what I'm calling out here. And to see that this is not as heavy, but it's appealing again to a broader market. It's got broader opinions of just enjoyment. And it sort of is like Wingspan, if you will, right? You've got some lighter people that enjoy it. You've got some medium weight people that enjoy it. You've got some, I got to be careful how I word this phrasing. You've got some gamers who prefer heavier games that still enjoy it. You have a broader fan base availability. Whereas the really heavy games are still not appealing to this or this. They're still only over here. And so when you've got something that spans in this area, you're going to get more people across the board. And that's what White Castle is doing. And again, I like dice worker placement, but I just never got a copy. So could it? Yeah, maybe. That's my preferred type of worker placement. So we'll see. I'll probably end up with a copy sometime this year. I'll trade for it at some point. Yeah, someone's going to get sick of it. That's how you get good games, folks. You trade stuff that you don't like, that they like, and you get stuff back that you like. But you have to be willing to trade good games in the first place. And that's the core problem, is some people aren't willing to do that. Number 4 was one of my honorable mentions, Apiary. Again, solid mechanistic. Probably the most solid mechanistic game from Stonemaier ever. I also just didn't feel as great about it overall. Like, it just wasn't as fun for me. Again, very solid game. Not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. Wasn't as impressed with some of the asymmetry with some of the different hexes on there. But the worker knockoff, worker upgrade, worker re-recruit and put back out there and decide how and when you want to do that. When other people do that to you, you get the choice of how you want to, finagle it. I think that's incredibly clever. I'd love to see that mechanism in other games. That was true about that and Expeditions, right? Both of them, that clever action mechanism. I love that. Putting down some of those asymmetric 3 different types of hexes, it works really well, and they've got some cool things going on there, but it just wasn't the fun factor for me. A little bit longer than I wanted. So, I can see why, again, a ton of people rated it high, but for me, it wasn't. And, same thing with number 5 here, Darwin's Journey. Heaviest game on this list by far, and it was the heavy Euro this year. Last year was Carnegie, which is kind of weird because I don't feel like Darwin's Journey was a 2023. Because it felt like it crowdfunded so long ago. And I don't really have anything else to say about it. Like, I'm going to get myself in trouble. I don't really know enough of the mechanisms. I don't know how it compares. I just know that it's heavier. And it's, again, probably the one that has the best staying power of the Euros of this year. Next one up, number 6. I talked about this in my video. It was on my top 10. Number 8 or something? And it's sort of Mad Max meets Wiz War. And that's just fun. And so I give a lot of kudos to Restoration Games for putting this out there right now. I do. I give them a lot of kudos for saying, okay, we're going to put something out. It failed the first time. It didn't have the crowdfunding appeal the first time around. And they came back around and they won people like me over. And I didn't back this on crowdfunding, right, folks? If you heard me on my video of my top 10, I reached out to a game store in Colorado when I found on Facebook that had a copy on their website. And I had them ship it to me and pay by credit card over the phone. So, right? That's how you know something is good. And with the reprint coming later this month with a new expansion, and if you missed out on Maximum Chrome and can't get some of those expansions in the first place right now because all of them aren't super widely available at retail, well, then you can get it. The only question for you at this point is going to be how much more is Maximum Chrome going to cost you this time than the first time around? But there's not really a good anything else out there like it. It's sort of what I wanted a couple other, random racing attack games to be, and just nothing else has sort of scratched that itch, which is really kind of nice. 7. Again, speaking of Darwin's Journey, I have no clue. Nucleum, it's striking while the iron's hot. Again, the latest release in terms of the heavy games this past year. And from Board and Dice, you're more familiar with them for all of the Euros that start with T. Got a ton of people that really enjoyed it. I will not ever have this on my list. This is too heavy a game for me. Its Boardgamegeek rating is a 4, but people enjoy it for various reasons, just like I enjoy other games for various reasons. It's already got an expansion announced. It's going to be coming out sometime this year, so why not strike while the iron is hot? And excuse my previous comment about Darwin's Journey being the heaviest because I missed that Hegemony is actually 8th on this list. Again, this is game that I will never, ever play. They just had a more recent outreach to say, hey, does anyone else want a review copy on one of the various websites that I'm signed up for, linked to, part of, whatever, you know what I mean. And I looked at this and I said, and then I said, no, Chris, no, you're never going to play this. This is best at a 3 or 4 player count. It's going to take you 3 or 4 hours. I don't have the time, bandwidth, wherewithal, game group for anything like this. Again, it's a game that I say, in a perfect world of board gaming, I would love to be able to have this, play this, and see how I feel about it. But it's a game, truth be told, I will never be able to say with any certainty whether or not I would have any inkling of interest in terms of actual enjoyment. Not for lack of desire, but for just sheer logistics. Like, that played a big role in my top 10 this year, if you didn't watch that video. Like, how can I get it to the table? Is it feasible? Is it a quality of life measure or not? And that's just becoming a bigger and bigger factor, especially when I re-ranked my ones from 2022, if you missed that one as well. And then 9, Distilled. Again, just preponderance now of heaviness. And so ignore everything about what I said earlier. Maybe I'll just edit that part out, where, heavy games are more niche, but heavy games are making a resurgence. I feel like on my side of the camera as well, there is a little bit overall stronger presence for heavier games, if you will, right? How do I say that delicately? Chris is saying a lot of the content creators aren't as enamored with things that are lighter weight, is what Chris is saying overall. And not as much take that. And it's true. I would argue that, right? I don't think that's false. I'm not slandering or saying anything that I, think is inflammatory or insulting to anybody, but I would make the argument that a vast number of content creators, probably more, enjoy things that are, less take that, less chaotic, less Amerithrash overall. Again, I'm probably wrong. So tell me how wrong I am in the comment section. I don't have anything else to say about Distilled. I don't know anything of the mechanisms. A game that I would try if somebody brought it to game night, but it's a game that I've never personally sought out like several of these others. 10, we'll top off the 10 with Voidfall. Again, you didn't watch my review of Voidfall, but I said this is a masterpiece of a game. It's a masterpiece of a game. But the logistical issues, the setup teardown issues, ultimately for me, it's probably the reason I just can't keep it in my collection. Technical masterpiece. But I think it's also an example of more is more. And if you want more is more, there's probably not a better game out there for more is more. But more is slowly also becoming more. And more, just in this too. And that was probably the biggest barrier, is the learning curve on that game. I mean, I give them kudos for all of the stuff that went into that. That is just an absolute work of art. But just like art, it's subjective and you may not like it. But Voidfall, Mind Clash continues to put out things along those lines. There's a reason people love them as much as they do. Number 11, Barcelona. One of the lighter Euros, again, with White Castle. Sort of flew under the radar. I think it's been on White Castle's coattails. Just kidding. White Castle's shadow, essentially. And it hasn't gotten as much recognition. But with sort of the city building aspects you've got going on there, I think it's doing something different. Again, it's a game I'd love to try trading for to see how I feel about it, but it's not a game, as it's falling outside of my typical realm of things, where I would necessarily buy it separately. I really like just the simplicity that goes with this game in White Castle, in a sense, right? Variable number of rounds. Get a turn, you take 2 actions. You build and you prep. And that's it. Worker placement, tile placement. Big fan of tile placement, though. So that's why it's always kind of been on my radar of, is this going to be ever of interest to me? Well, maybe, if I'm going to start having things that are in that weight realm, 3 to 4, I'm going to be very picky and choosy. I'm going to have to get it by giving up something that I really don't want. I'm not going to trade something I really like to get it to try and to see and to fail from that aspect of things. Next up, Forest Shuffle. Easily the lightest weight game so far on this listing as a whole, but just a card-based attracting trees and attracting species to those trees in another earth-based ecological game where you're really just drawing cards and adding them or paying costs and putting them down. That's it. but the shuffle of how you manipulate this, the hand management, the multi-use card aspects, it's kind of been, slowly creeping into people's vocabularies and people's interest ever since the, later conventions of the year. So this is one where this multi-use card play is just enjoyable. Too many games also in my collection already that sort of occupy a same spot. So, it reminds me a little bit of like a Canopy-esque game. And Canopy was good. I didn't love it. I thought it was enjoyable. But I also said in the same light, I have other games that are doing very similar things. So I kind of said, well, is this going to replace something? And people really seem to like it, though. It's got almost 4,000 ratings. It's ranked on the top 700 already at this point. So I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that it's on my radar, probably of the games on this list so far that I don't have, of the most interest as a whole. But again, am I going to end up with it in my collection anytime soon? Who knows? Then, 13, I've already kind of let my feelings be known on this one with Ticket to Ride Legacy Legends of the West. The Legacy style of things has sort of fallen out of vogue. I understand why people like it, but again, for a retail game to be $100 and for it to require me optimally to have 3 or 4 players at all times of the same group to have a slight different spin on Ticket to Ride. And this is the trouble, right? Like some games I really like it for the experience and other games I like it for the gameplay. And this one I look at from the experience standpoint, and that's where really good's going to be, and that's where it's really going to have its strong suit. I have a hard enough time nowadays backing, low double-digit crowdfunding campaigns, picking up even things like White Castle or Forest Shuffle, like I mentioned. So for me to go in on this as a legacy game without the group, I look at that as a fool's errand. And again, me being the fool. If you got this game, I'm completely fine with that. But I feel like, too, it got a lot of hype with review copies being sent out. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's very useful for the hobby to give some insight into that. But legacy games as a whole are a trap, I think, for a lot of us regular consumers, right? Because the other most common struggle I see being mentioned is not lack of games. It's not lack of space. It's lack of people and time. And this requires both. It's not like I can just put this on the shelf and pull this out whenever, right? It's like, okay, you're going to have to play this repeatedly over a short period of time to get this with the same people. And that is a huge, potential issue. I'm not speaking for you guys, though, because you guys who are watching this are the elite of the elite. I'm sure you guys have 10 different people you play games with 4 times a week, and you can pick out the same 3 people to play this game with over a week and a half, and you can be done with all 12 sessions. So none of those comments, I'm sure, are applying to you whatsoever. And then we're going on to 14. Expeditions. Again, I've already covered my thoughts on Expeditions. It was the other honorable mention on my 11 through 20 video, just outside of the top 20. And I said, again, I think it's doing something clever with the action mechanism of putting down the cube and selecting the other 2, the ones that aren't covered. I think the grid-based system and the huge deck of cards is absolutely fantastic in its asymmetry, but it's about 20% too big, both literally and metaphorically. Length of time-wise, doesn't quite have the 4x-wise, and just production-wise, about 20% too big. But it also just fell a little bit short for me as well. And that's okay. At the same time, like I said with Apiary, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. They've already officially announced an expansion. So is it going to address some of my criticisms? Is it going to make me desire it and want to play it more? Is it going to be more like a Champions of Midgard, a Lords of Waterdeep expansion that you go, I don't want to play ever without this, right? I mean, that's sort of what even happened with Wingspan, where people are like, there's the predominant egg strategy for Wingspan or tucking strategy or whatever, right? Oh, the expansions address that and they deal with it and they mitigate it. And, with Tapestry, similar issues, right? I don't know. But that's what I look at this as. And I go, well, I could see it rising. Give me an expansion that really does that. I mean, again, I hate saying an expansion should fix it, but could it? I mean, the possibility is there. And I've already talked about number 15 here, World Wonders, as well. My review, either very shortly before this, after this, I think this is one of my now favorite polyomino games. I just think it works. I didn't think it was going to work as good as it does. I mean, the sum of the parts is greater than the individual parts. The monuments are clever. The money usage per round is clever. You are, going around based on initiative order and getting whatever you want and based off whatever money you have. But the monuments don't have a cost. It's just, you have to spend whatever money you have remaining. And I love that because you never feel like you're wasting stuff. You always feel like you're making the most of every single turn. And the tile placement is very crucial of how you space things out and how you divide things. It gives you elements of really feeling like you're making meaningful decisions in terms of victory points and placements without making it too complicated as well. Because that was my other concern. If you've got all these elements, how well do you balance those? How well are they intuitively connected? And not everyone's a lover of this one, but I was really impressed. I was really impressed. And like I said, if this was attained by me earlier in the year, it probably would have been in my top 10. But even with that being said, it was 13. Then 16. We're talking 16. I actually have a copy of this. I don't know why I have a copy of this, folks. Age of Innovation, right? Terra Mystica and Gaia Project's older brother. Which, you know, begs the question now that Gaia Project just had a recently announced expansion that I covered in the news video from a couple weeks ago. I mean, is it that much different? Again, people like it. People become super meta and start bidding, bluffing victory points at the beginning of these games and complaining about the balance even before it's out in a physical retail form. But which one of these nemesis trios of the heavy Euro side of things are you a fan of, right? The comparison there obviously being Nemesis, Nemesis Retaliation, Nemesis Lockdown, Age of Innovation, Gaia Project, and Terra Mystica. Does this change your opinion? Or does Gaia Project getting an expansion change your opinion? I have no idea. This is probably a game I never should have traded for, that I will never get played because it's way too heavy for me, and I probably regret it, but at least I guess it has good trade value back. I don't know. I hate doing that. You know how much I say on this channel I hate doing it from that side of things, so we'll leave it at that. 17, Great Western Trail, the New Zealand edition. People really like this edition. I think people, from when I was reading some comparisons shortly after it came out, I know, shortly after it came out, right? So take that for what you will, but it seems like at least a little bit of staying power from that aspect of things, because a fair number of people I have read prefer it over the other two. It's a little bit more complicated, so they got a little bit more going on, and, well, it's freaking New Zealand. That's what we've got going on here. People seem to really like it as a whole, and if you like the original, I mean, this is probably a better version of it comparatively, because that's just what a lot of the other reviews that I have no influence, say, or understanding of will tell you as well. So very well thought of for something that came out much earlier in the year. I'm glad people remembered that, because it seems like a vast majority of these games on this list really came out in the last 6 months of the year, or even the last like 3 months of the year. So speaking of that though, Evacuation, and heavy Euros where you're having an engine builder that's slowly getting worse instead of better. Your planet's blowing up and you're trying to escape. I have no idea. It's got a cool freaking board though. It's a cool freaking board. But it was well thought of by a lot of the heavier gamer channels and coverers. And so, rightly so, I guess. It hasn't gotten as much hype, I think. It kind of like got a bunch of hype, and then it sort of wasn't available like widely in North America. So just haven't heard as much about that. And then interestingly enough too, the next one, 19, Scholars of the South Tigris. I know next to nothing about this. I covered Wayfarers, and I just, said it wasn't quite right for me. Apparently people like this one even more than Wayfarers, so that's saying something, I guess. If it is, as the recommendations state, heavier than Wayfarers though, again, I shouldn't even try to bother acquiring a copy at this point, but I'm tempted. I like trying new things, but I just get trepidatious too, because when you're learning so many of these new games, so many of these heavy games, right? And trying to grasp the nuances, grasp the actual dynamics and the mechanistic approach, and how to just, navigate the board itself. Things like this are hard when you're doing it all by yourself. If you know what I'm talking about, raise your hand in the comment section and let me know. So is it one of the better Garfield games? How does it compare to some of the heavier ones overall? I don't know. Speaking of mea culpas, though, which I wasn't, but we're speaking of mea culpas, when I just covered The Last Light on crowdfunding back on GameFound with their relaunch, reprint, new little gizmos, gadgets, and content. You know what? I read the rulebook finally of Last Light, and I was relatively impressed. Now, I've heard more than a few people say, though, at the same time, this whole 60 minutes or less thing doesn't always pan out, especially with a higher player count and new players. So that'd be the one thing you'd have to know in this 4x simultaneous play your card, play your card, play your card until everybody's refreshed, and then spin the board around and rinse and repeat until somebody gets 20 lights or victory points. So people like it. I haven't heard many bad things about it apart from those minor criticisms. I mean, I think it's gadzooks priced though, and that's probably the biggest barrier to entry. I mean, again, and those deluxifications are cool. I won't lie. Those little planet resin situations they've got going on there, fantastic looking. but I'm not sure if I'm ever going to willing to pay, you know, $100, $120 for the level of deluxification and size to go along with it, just because I'm just too cheap. And why? I don't know. It's just a mental block with some of these. But, you know, they said that they're going to do something different, and I'll give them kudos. I'm eating crow on this one a little bit on a couple of different videos here, but I'm going to be consistent and say, yeah, it seems like you've done something different. And so kudos where kudos is due. So that's 20. 21 is The Witcher: The Old World. I don't know what I'm going to do with my Witcher: The Old World yet. I haven't had a chance to play through it extensively since getting a copy, and it's definitely different than the original. And I think that's a good thing. I still have wondering and concerns about if it's still a little bit longer than I would have liked, like the original one was, especially at a higher player count. And are all of the expansions actually created equal? But people who like your Amerithrash, Ameritruck, people who like their Amerithrash really like this game. And so we'll see. I'm interested to see how this one stands up at the test of time, because this is one I could see going very much like more of a Cthulhu Death May Die overall. I could just see it petering off too in a year or two and not really getting nearly as much attention, despite it doing, again, I would argue something slightly different in how they approach some of the mechanics with the card-based systems there. It's unique. It's a little bit clever, but again, with how clever it is in the different way, some people are going to like that, and some people are absolutely going to be turned off. So I could see that going regardless either way there. 22, Kutna Horå, the City of Silver. Again, this one got some hype, and then it kind of a little bit divisive. Some people really loved it. Some people really didn't like it for a Euro game, economic style with an ever-shifting market. Again, I'd love to maybe try it out at some point. I'm not going to go out and seek it though right now either, just like with Scholars of the South Tigris, because it's not going to be easy for me to get played, and I'm looking at Age of Innovation that I just mentioned too that I can't get played. So is it gonna, you know, attract me? I love the aesthetic. I like the idea of it, but I'm not sure gameplay wise it would be a good fit from that aspect. 23, I talked about it on my top 10. It was in my top 10, Unmatched Adventures, Tales to Amaze. So if you like co-ops, if you like Unmatched, I mean, this is going to be a, well, match made in heaven. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist it. It just came out before I could stop it. Phrasing. Anyway, so the only problem I have is I'd like a few more minions and a few more bosses. So I'd really wish, or really would like to see, either a way to port more characters in as bosses, or to have another dedicated, not standalone expansion to give it more breadth and depth. Just because, you know, you've got two main bosses, and once you play them, you can mix and match minions, but it becomes very much pandemic otherwise. And as much as I like the co-op, Unmatched is still not my favorite sort of 1 versus 1 skirmish style in the first place, because of the mechanistic differences between that and other things. And then 24, we're doing your Knarr. Gnarly! Again, the bad dad, you know, we're getting towards the end of the video, so I can say whatever I want. And Viking crew, rotate them, activate them, get their powers, use the matching colors along the way to expose new destinations and trading to get more gains or reputation. As a light card-driven gameplay with under a 2 rating and 30-minute playtime, I mean, yeah, that's appealing, of just seeing if I can try it out and see how I feel about it. There was another one like this, Lofoten, if you remember that one. It sort of just gives me similar vibes where I like the idea of it, but I traded for a copy of it and I got it to the table and I just said, I just don't really feel like these mechanisms are a good fit with me. I saw what it was trying to do. I appreciated it, but at the same time, I was just kind of like, meh. And especially with the light card fillers, that's, you know, the biggest risk, hit or miss, even though they're cheaper, even though, you know, it's going to cost you less either way. And then last up here at 25, Life of the Amazonia. And this is a really good game. This was actually on my top 20. This was 19 on my top 20. Think Cascadia meets Quacks of Quedlinburg. And you're going to have what you got going on there with the various animals in a Calico-esque, very vaguely way of laying them down, and pattern building, and the asymmetry of how the animals score. And the cardboard waterfall gives you more of the Everdell tree vibe as a whole. So I think they did a really good job with this game, but it's going to be a little bit too much for some people who are looking for something lighter. It is going to be the step up for those that hated Cascadia and thought that that was too light, though. But you may also not like it because it is the bag building resource management of Quacks in a slightly different spin. I didn't mind it whatsoever. It's going to be a harder play though for my wife because it is a little bit more complicated and it's a little bit longer overall. I mean, you're talking probably 75 minutes with, you know, people who know what they're doing once they get going, which isn't a bad thing, but compared to say like your Cascadias, which you can play at maybe like 25, and that weight difference, That's be interesting more than anything else. So that's the top 25. Let me talk to you about some of the best of the rest, though, as well, that were outside the 25 that still got some honorable mentions. And let's be clear, you know, of this list right now, there were like 88 different games that got a significant amount of attention. So that's why I said, you know, in a couple videos earlier in this year already, 2023 was a freaking amazing year overall, folks. Like, if you didn't like games in 2023, I mean, that's more probably on you than the actual quality of the games. Games I didn't talk about that just made it outside of the top 25. The Fox Experiment from Pandasaurus. Very mixed feelings about that one from people. Star Wars, the deck building game. That was number 15. Freelancers. Totally a Freelancers Crossroad plaid hat game style of situation. Forgotten Waters, just lighter and crazier, if you will. Then Marvel Zombies sitting at 30. Fit to Print, I wasn't a fan of. 32 is Station Fall, which was just outside my top 10. That was my 11th game of the year. Three Ring Circus, which kind of got the wave from DeVere of a little bit of a push. Somehow Horseless Carriage was 34th from Splotter. Earthborn Rangers, Legacy of You, Sagrada Artisans, Frosthaven, then Even Fall and Wild Tiled West, followed by Septima and Dune Imperium Uprising. Again, Dune Imperium Uprising, folks, was my number 1 game of the year. Even Fall's not even available in North America for 2 or 3 months. That's kind of why I, you know, didn't really like that as much. Frosthaven is just too deep for a lot of people like myself and a lot of these channels to get into to a greater extent. It's gonna be very niche. And Sagrada Artisans, I'm not surprised that's on there. I railed it again, you know, mea culpa a little bit on their crowdfunding campaign, but it looked like a solid game overall. I just wasn't going to pay extras for, you know, colored pencils. A few other sleepers here. Castles of Burgundy, the special edition, which somehow people are allowing on a list like this, but you can't have the reprint of Ra. Like, come on, that's freaking ridiculous. Like, whoever makes these lists up, I'm sorry, you know, let's talk about that for a second, just at the tail end here. That kind of always irritates me, right? Well, it's a new game. It's not a new game. It's a reprint. It's a redeluxification. There's slight newness. Well, same sort of thing with Ra. They put a new skin on it, but one is considered, and I don't know, I'm nitpicking here. So I'm old man shouting at the skies. A few others after that. I heard, you know, a few people say that Tales from the Red Dragon Inn is one of their favorite cooperative games of the year as well, which is a complete surprise. I remember it on crowdfunding and I just kind of poo-pooed it. So I've been interested to try and maybe get that. Veil of Eternity, again, another game high on my list to get this year, but not available in North America. And then also we had Leaf, which I thought was a highly underrated. My review was a dark horse of the year, essentially, just outside of my top 20. And then also Sleeping Gods, Distant Skies, which I would make the argument sitting at 51, that's probably a lot lower, but it came at the tail end of the year when everyone was already saturated or didn't have time to get it in before the end of the year. So that's why it's not there. Rolling Heights at 56. I was a big fan of that game as well. Marrakesh is on there. In the Footsteps of Darwin, I wasn't as big a fan of. My Island at 66. Lacuna at 67. Boom, Lacuna! That was my 10 game. 20 Strong, 70. Terraforming Mars, the dice game, which was in my top 20 as well. I believe it was 18. And then a few others like Beast, Frostpunk, Milfiori, and Lords of Ragnarok, as well as Daybreak, rounding out the top 100 there. So what were you surprised was higher? What were you surprised was lower? Again, as I sort of feel like Boardgamegeek tends to skew towards, I think a lot of the rankings skew towards heavier games overall as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a smattering of other stuff, but proportionately to the overall max large gaming scene, there is a much heavier throw toward that than proportionally, you know, otherwise. I'm making stuff up. I'm probably wrong. You can disagree with me in the comment section. You know, I'm a lighter gamer at heart either way, so maybe it's just my bias. It's probably just my bias talking, that I see all this stuff that I don't know and I just go, nah, people don't like that as much. I'm just teasing. I don't know. That's just my own personal opinion again. And you know, as I always say, I'm always wrong. I'm a second tier YouTuber for a reason. And that's why you can disagree with me all you want. And I'm completely okay with that, as I've been told repeatedly. Which reminds me of a few emails I've gotten, which I'll address in a further video as well in the upcoming future. If you remember my video talking about the new FOMO with Launch Boom and the putting money down before the campaign to get a little bit of exclusive whatevers, interesting comments and, you know, back and forths with a few publishers as well, a few small publishers who are saying, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but let me tell you where I'm coming from too. And you know what? It's really good to hear that dialogue. And I'm, you know, again, very pleased because it's been a dialogue saying, hey, look, consumer, business, you know, personal, professional, very interesting scheme of things. So I need just to open up my own crowdfunding consulting is really what it comes down to. That's all I got. Stay classy. Peace out. I'm done rambling at the end because you don't want to hear all this stuff anyway. Have a great freaking day. See you around.